In your bulletin this morning, there is an insert that would look like this, and on the back there's some information about this particular appeal. It's primarily about raising dollars to provide for the next generation of pastors. 42% of our rostered leaders in the South Dakota Synod will reach retirement age in the next 10 years, and that excludes me because I'm beyond that age. That's from 56 to 65. So if we don't recruit, educate, and train the next generation of leaders, we could be in trouble. And so we know we can do this, but the best way to describe this particular appeal is to watch this short video.
Listen, listen, God is calling through the word inviting, offering forgiveness, comfort, and joy.
I'm Senator Tim Johnson.
And I'm Barb Johnson. The Evangelical Lutheran Church in America is at a crossroads, and South Dakota is leading the way to encourage the development of new pastors.
South Dakota Lutherans are seizing their opportunity for outreach and mission.
And we are proud to join the South Dakota Synod in this campaign.
The South Dakota Synod consists of 212 congregations, both large and small, proclaiming the good news of Jesus to every hungering soul in this ever-changing state. But as our large community congregations continue to grow, many small and medium-sized communities have dwindled in numbers.
Our vision for the South Dakota Synod is that all may be fed. So it's not just about food, that's also spiritually. From our Liberian community of faith that worships at First Lutheran to Woyatan in North Rapid, we have ethnic-specific ministries that will always need support from outside.
By the grace of God, our synod has been blessed to be the leader of the ELCA for encouraging folks to enter the seminary. But our current generation of leaders are beginning to retire, leaving vacancies in many of our South Dakota Lutheran congregations.
So how do you recruit, invite, and keep pastors to replace the folks that are retiring that have served very faithfully and very well?
The theme of this campaign is listen, God is calling, never be the same.
And our goal is $2.5 million in cash gifts over a 3 to 5 year period.
God is calling. God calls all of us. It doesn't matter if we're 2 or if we're 82 or somewhere in between. But what we know as Lutherans is that when we have been called, we are forever changed.
I think it would be incredibly sad if some of these gifted individuals that are inspired to follow the ministry are not able to do that for financial reasons.
We need that support. We need your prayers. We need your advice, and we need your economic support.
There isn't a person that couldn't help with this campaign or contribute in some way.
Some obviously are more capable than others, and those of us that are more capable should sacrifice and do more. But I think the real key here is equal sacrifice, not equal gifts. It's a matter of everybody doing what they can do. And if we all do that, then our prayers will be answered and we'll go over our goal.
We're looking for your support in every corner of South Dakota.
Your prayers and your offerings and your support to this campaign and to other pastors, it's a way of doing God's work with your hands and enabling them then to do God's work with their hands.
If you're passionate about your life with Christ, if you're passionate about the ministry of the church, then money will follow.
I think at the end of the day, what you hope is that the investments that we make will strengthen our synod, strengthen the church for service to mankind, to the citizens of our communities, to our state as a whole, to the kingdom of God.
Recognizing this particular need in the Synod Assembly in 2014, this appeal was authorized by the congregation of the South Dakota Synod. And every congregation is invited to participate in this appeal and ask every member of the congregation to consider whether or not they're willing to support this appeal. Here at Peace Lutheran, there was also discussion about eliminating or retiring the indebtedness that you have, and so your leadership, and I totally support that decision, rather than running 2 separate campaigns, chose to run one campaign together. So 10% of all the proceeds that come to the Imagine appeal will go to the South Dakota Synod appeal, Listen, God is Calling. Suzanne and I, that's my wife, we sat down in terms of talked about what we would be willing to do over a 3-year period and kind of made that commitment. Then at one of the meetings of the steering committee, one of the members said, you know, if everybody would just give all that up front, we could whap this out in a year. And we took that to heart, and so we gave our commitment a week ago and encourage you to prayerfully consider what you would be willing to do to support the debt retirement appeal for Peace Lutheran Church, but also this particular appeal for the South Dakota Synod. And I know if we take it seriously, we can get this done. But I'm also here today to share with you the message about what we heard about in the reading this morning from 1 Corinthians 13. And this is called the love chapter, where Paul, in his letter to the churches at Corinth, talked about faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. I'm in my 45th year as an ordained pastor, and over the years, I have been asked to read this particular chapter more often at weddings than at any other time. Now, why would they want to read this? Isn't that all just a great, great time, full of festivity and love for each other? It's a great and wonderful time. But the reality is, statistically in our culture today, 50% of the marriages end up in divorce. So what's happened? Why does a relationship feel like it's on empty? Well, over the years, when either a person or a couple has come to me because their marriage feels like it's on empty, and they tell me, boy, our marriage is just miserable, my answer to them is always the same. Congratulations, you're halfway to a good one. Every marriage really typically goes through 5 stages. The dream phase, where everything is all rose-colored. Second is disillusionment, when you might begin to ask, did I make the right decision to go into this relationship? Then you hit miserable, and then you begin to ask the question, should I get out of this relationship? If you're willing to hang in there, and this is where love is so compelling, if you're willing to hang in there, the next step is awakening, and then a stage of mature love. We need to go through that process. But far often than not, when we begin to feel empty, we want to bail out. But there are other ways that we might feel an emptiness. I don't know if when you came in this morning, did you notice all the quilts that are out in the narthex area? If you didn't, hope you looked at what's coming up this month. Graduation. Now, maybe you have a graduate, and they're going to be recognized next week with the giving of a quilt. But especially if it's your last child, what happens this year? You have an empty nest. Statistically, there's a spike in divorce rates with an empty nest. How do you fill that emptiness? How do you fill that loneliness? There are other ways in which we might feel an emptiness and a loneliness, and probably one of the more significant one is when death touches your life. There is a void and there is an emptiness there that just cannot be filled this side of heaven. But when love has been the foundation of a marital relationship or personal relationships of any kind, because of the love that was shared, and especially that sustaining love in Jesus Christ, you can face the future. But there's another type of emptiness that's kind of gripping our society, and that's related to money. Money issues is one of the big 4 reasons that marriages begin to tumble. And I don't know about where you're at individually, but if you're like me, you have experienced those moments in life where the end of the month comes later than the end of the money. So the money runs out before the end of the month. And that's kind of an empty, sinking feeling. And certainly while I was at seminary when things were really tough financially, I can remember times when my wife and I would pull the cushions off of the couch and off of the chair, and hopefully some change fell out of our pockets and there would be enough change there to go buy a loaf of bread. But that's an emptiness. And that's why here at Peace Lutheran Church they've offered the courses on financial planning, the Dave Ramsey course, in terms of the freedom that you can experience when you handle money wisely. And that's also what your leadership here at Peace Lutheran is talking about in terms of your capital indebtedness. And if we can just eliminate that, imagine what we could do in terms of mission and ministry if we didn't have those debt payments. And I find that rather exciting. But I don't know specifically where you're at. But I would be very surprised if there are not persons sitting out here that don't feel some type of emptiness or loneliness. What do you do when you feel that your life is running on empty? That happened for me and my wife a few years ago. We moved to Sioux Falls in 2008 because I was called to do the initial work for establishing a new congregation in Northwest Sioux Falls, which is now Westside Lutheran. And before I took that call, I checked with the city, and they were talking about all the growth and development that was going to take place in that area. Within a month after I accepted the call, Walmart announced that they were putting their plans on hold to build a new store. The state of South Dakota said they wouldn't be putting the exchange on Interstate 90 and Marion Road, and all the development in that area just stopped. It was also at the same time when our ELCA started to discuss issues related to human sexuality, and the money that was flowing into the South Dakota Synod and to the national church just really took a hit. And so cuts had to be made. And one of the cuts that was made was to end that initial work and development on Northwest Sioux Falls. So I was out of a job. My wife, who is the Faith Formation and Youth Coordinator for the South Dakota Synod, she was cut from half-time to fourth-time because of the money just stopped coming to the South Dakota Synod. Now, we weren't totally running on empty, but boy, did it feel like it. And that's not a very easy feeling when your personal gauge is on empty. But the one thing that I'm very, very grateful for is that we were members of this congregation. And the support we received personally from this congregation and especially from the staff during that difficult transition in our lives was so meaningful, and we're so grateful for what they did. And at that time, that was Pastor Paul, Pastor Rolf, Pastor Obed, and Pat Eidsness in terms of the pastoral staff. And they were so supportive and helped us through that time. And so one of the things that you want to do as a congregation now in terms of mission and ministry is to eliminate your indebtedness so you can continue to do those types of things. And what were we reminded of? I'm talking about my wife and myself. We were always reminded of the ever overflowing, gracious love that God gives to us in Jesus Christ. No matter what, especially when you're feeling on empty, God's gracious love is overflowing. And again, I don't know individually where you are at, but I would be very surprised if there aren't some here that feel some type of emptiness in your life. It might be addiction, money problems, relationship problems. But I do know that God's overflowing gracious love can help you through those moments. And so what I would offer up for you this morning is a simple prayer, and ask that you pray this for yourself, and it comes from the words of a song. Fill my cup, Lord. I lift it up, Lord. Come and quench this thirsting of my soul. Bread of heaven, feed me till I want no more. Fill me up, Lord, and make me whole. And now may the gracious, overflowing love of God keep you in his grace, now and forever. Amen.